Welcome! Today we are going to time travel back to some of our childhoods to chat about the pop culture phenomenon that was the 90s. Because being an adult is stupid, and I want to go back to drinking Ecto Cooler and watching Power Rangers. You're listening to Open Here, a podcast produced by Pack TV. I'm Tiff Phillips. Let's get started. Hi friends, hope all is well and wonderful. Today we are going to chat about the 90s. Why? Well, because the 90s is a decade I'm an expert on, because I lived it. Today we're going to unlock some core memories and revel in the joys of yesteryear. Now, if you weren't a preteen or teen in the 90s, don't worry, you're still invited to this little past party. You may even remember a thing or two and can giggle along with me as I state my case as to why the 90s was the best decade ever. All right, let's hop in our time machine. Number 1, music. This is how we do it. We could do an entire show on 90s music. It had the best hip hop and R&B, the best alternative. And can we talk about the pop music? Was there anything more debatable in middle school than who was better, NSYNC or Backstreet Boys? But whether you're into Justin's Frosted Tips or AJ's dreamy bad boy attitude, it must be clear to you by now that neither was better than the girl power-inducing juggernaut that was sometimes and still is the Spice Girls. I remember the days of being in my basement trying to memorize the dance moves to Say You'll Be There with my 4 besties, trying to figure out if I was more of a scary spice or a ginger spice that day. In opposition to pop, the 90s also produced one of the best music genres of all time, the short-lived but beautifully angsty grunge era. Now, who didn't rock out to Kurt Cobain mumbling the lyrics to Smells Like Teen Spirit while sad, emo cheerleaders half-heartedly shook their pom-poms? Grunge was a musical sensation that not only encouraged a decade of flannel and ripped jeans, but also brought to light the heartbreak and angst that teens were finally allowed to feel and shout about. The 90s also was probably the most musically diverse decade in history, with its mix of dance/house, R&B, hip-hop, pop, electronica, alternative, reggae, and more. And these genres were super influential on an international scale as well, sprouting such subgenres as Asian movements of K-pop, J-rock, and it gave rise to a huge Latin influence. It was the decade where things revved up. Hip-hop got harder, DJs became rock stars, and previously drowned-out voices were finally being heard. Was there any other decade that did more for music than the 90s? Feel free to have your opinion, but I'll argue, nah. Number 2, toys. In addition to music, did any other decade have better toys than the 90s? Guys, no. We're talking GAC, Polly Pockets, Pogs, Game Boys, Furbies. Okay, maybe not Furbies. Those things were a little terrifying. The 90s was the first time toys actually taught life lessons, like Tamagotchis, for example. I'll jog your memory for you. Tamagotchis were a handheld digital pet that you had to feed, clean up after, and keep alive. Most of the time, it was shaped like an egg, and the rule was apparently that you had to have 15 of them on a keychain, which I found completely terrifying. The experience went as follows. You would save up all of your money, then drag your unimpressed parental figure to the toy store, pick your color, which was a blindingly yellow or blue or pink or some other obnoxious hue, and then you would come home and give your Tamagotchi life. At this point, you would become completely overwhelmed that you have an actual life to take care of. That's right, friends. They died if you didn't feed, play, or clean up after them. Like, they put a little halo on their heads to let you know that you've just committed neglect. Moral of this experience, if you couldn't raise a Tamagotchi, don't get pregnant. Thanks for the life lessons, 90s. And many of the toys from this decade also taught us STEM before STEM even existed. I mean, it was like the government was saying, hey, we need more engineers. Let's create toys that make kids way better at building stuff. Wait, did I just uncover a government conspiracy? Anyway, yeah, we got smarter by building things like Connects and putting together our marble runs. Not only did they make us smarter, but these toys also taught us how to entertain ourselves when our buddies weren't around. And look at us now. Millennials love being alone. We hate people. Oh, well, maybe that's not a good life lesson. Clearly, we had the best toys because they're all coming back. Seriously, go to the store, you'll see them. 90s toys are timeless. You're welcome. Number 3, food. Just like the 50s had their weird hot dog jello molds, the 90s also had its fair share of weird food. Remember that time ketchup came in different colors or when we had clear cola? Weird, right? But even though these were bizarre as heck, we also had the most creative snacks ever. Yogurt that came out of a tube, chips that came in 3D shapes, juice boxes shaped like grenades. Like, how creatively fulfilled were these creators at these snack companies? The sky was apparently the limit for these folks. Additionally, the 90s taught kids to cook for themselves, albeit it was via microwave or toaster. But I mean, who doesn't love a good frozen food loaded with enough preservatives to ensure it doesn't age for 30 years? I mean, aren't toaster waffles and microwave bagel pizza bites part of everyone's dietary regimen? No? Just me? Okay. Number 4, movies. The 90s was the start of many a thing. For instance, it was the decade of the movie theater blockbuster. I know we have blockbusters now, but this was the decade where they were huge. I mean, we had The Matrix, Terminator, Independence Day. Let's talk about Independence Day because it uses some of the elements that the 90s were known for. Will Smith being a common element used in many a blockbuster, because the guy is a national treasure. Let's sum it up. A few days before, you guessed it, Independence Day, the skies part and massive alien spacecrafts appear throughout the world. This nerdy science guy who used to be married to one of the White House aides tries to warn the president that shiz is going down. But no one listens and it's too late and the aliens attack humanity. The rest of civilization, mainly the US because America, has to figure out a way to fight back, and they do it on, you guessed it, Independence Day. And that pretty much sums up the type of plot every blockbuster in the 90s had. One part aliens, one part overdramatic yet underactive president, one part contagious catchphrases, and 2 parts expensive overdone visual effects. Oh yeah, lots of explosions. The 90s were all about explosions. Not only were the 90s the decade of the blockbuster, but was also the decade where indie films got their big start with movies like Clerks, Reservoir Dogs, and Dazed and Confused. There was freedom in that. More ideas, more collaborators were coming to the table. Horror movies got cerebral and changed their game. Scream, for example, was a movie that examined and paid homage to the genre and played on the common tropes used in horror. And not only were the movies themselves better, but the actual movie experience was better too. Going to the movie theater was an event. Your mom dropped you off with your friends, you had $10 for a ticket, a popcorn, and a vessel of soda larger than a school bus. And you went early for the trivia. You also had the rise of the video rental store. Who didn't love a Friday night reading over the backs of VHS covers with your besties, fighting with that kid in the Jankos for the last copy of Billy Madison? In the 90s, we lived like gods. Number 5, television. Oh, 90s TV. Where should we begin? The 90s was the start of many a TV trend. Adult animation came to the forefront with shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy. It also brought crime procedurals like Law & Order into view and made way for some of the greatest sitcoms in TV history. But like toys and food of the 90s, TV tried to teach us some things. And it was usually lessons learned right after school. I can remember taking the bus home and repeatedly eyeing my pink see-through Casio watch, making sure I was going to be at my drop-off location at 3:25 p.m. So I had time to run down my street, throw my backpack on the couch, and turn on the best TV show ever made, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. What is it about? Thank you for asking. I'm happy to explain. You see, after an evil outer space witch escapes her space dumpster prison after 10,000 years of isolation, her main goal is to conquer Earth. I know, I had you at space dumpster prison. A wizard named Zordon, who's essentially this giant floating head in a tube of water, and his trusty robot Alpha 5 enlist 5 normal teenagers with attitude and gives them powers that are connected to ancient magic held by dinosaurs. They also get assigned slightly sexist, racially questionable colors, and a spirit dinosaur to fight Rita's henchmen, which include a few dumb sidekicks, an army of soldiers made of putty, and a range of giant creatures she makes out of random objects. Sounds like an acid trip, right? Nope, it's not. It's 90s television. So, as insane as this show sounds, it taught kids such lessons as the importance of teamwork, staying active, and how to stand up to bullies. It also taught us that pollution is bad. I swear, there are like 3 or 4 episodes where they are just picking up trash. And the Power Rangers weren't the only ones dishing out life advice. The 90s is also known for the most amazing after-school specials. So let me explain. In 1972, ABC decided they were going to teach kids about life's difficulties in the cheesiest, most unintentionally ironic ways. Oh, trust me, they're amazing. And although it started in the 70s, you thought you had me there, didn't you? They didn't become hugely popular until the 90s. After-school specials tackled such topics as illiteracy, drug abuse, divorce, etc. Each episode title was a declarative sentence, such as, "My dad lives downtown," and "My mom's having a baby." Or sometimes they used alliteration, such as reading, writing, and reefer. And what did we learn from after-school specials? 1, the more tragic or overdramatic the situation is, the hotter your love interest is. 2, parents are people too, even if they get pregnant with that guy who's not your dad. 3, don't trust your friends. They're druggies, sex addicts, and overall degenerates. 4, drugs are not the answer, but apparently hot guys are. Not only did 90s television teach us, but for many millennials, the 90s raised us. Our entire childhood seemed grounded in television. We got in trouble with Zach Morris, solved mysteries with Mulder and Scully, went on adventures with Xena, slayed vampires with Buffy, and had nightmares about Are You Afraid of the Dark? And also cheered for Ross and Rachel to get together. It was our sense of escape from a world of war, school shootings, riots, and bombings. These characters were our friends, and in 26 to 43 minutes, we felt like everything was gonna be okay. You know, for basically all of us, the decade we grew up in was the best. It's the foundation for who we are as people, and these trips to the past are actually good for us. In fact, in 2020, 3 colleges teamed up to do a study, and their research showed that moderate doses of nostalgia is actually beneficial. That a little dose of memory lane helps strengthen our sense of who we are and makes us feel more hopeful and inspired. So no matter what decade you're rooting for, it's okay to take a walk and to relive it once in a while. Those were some good times, and you deserve to live those memories and pay homage to the things that make you who you are. Just don't get stuck there, because the present can be just as sweet. You can find good in the everyday. You've been listening to Open Here, a podcast produced by the local scene of Plymouth Area Community Television. PAC-TV is the community media provider for the Massachusetts towns of Plymouth, Pembroke, Kingston, and Duxbury. To see more of our content, visit pactv.org/thelocalscene. I'm Tiff Phillips. Thanks for tuning in. Let's hang out again soon. Hi friends, if you like this video by The Local Scene, share the love and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe.